The first college football playoff rankings are in, and here's how they look. At number 1, no surprise, undefeated Oregon, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. Now, the rankings are going to look different than the projected bracket because, again, the top 5 conference champions earn automatic bids with the 4 highest ranked teams receiving a first-round bye. So you see Ohio State and Oregon in the top 2 spots in terms of rankings, but they play in the Big Ten together. We're just spelling it out for you. So that wouldn't work in terms of being a conference champ as you follow suit here. For example, Texas is 5 in the bracket. They are 6th because of the delineation between the SEC as well. So this is what is important. This is the bracket that you will look at. This is the bracket you will fill out, a la the big dance. It's a little bit smaller of a dance, but it is a big dance for college football. As you see, Boise State would travel to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. Ashton Jeanty and Quinshon Judkins going head-to-head. Sign me up. Indiana and Tennessee clashing. That would be a heck of a game in Knoxville. Alabama and Texas, we've seen them tangle a time or two before. And Notre Dame and Penn State in Happy Valley. That game would need to be at night, please, because daytime, that is criminal. Please put that at night committee. And then you see the winner moves on. BYU would host a quarterfinal game. Oregon would host the winner of Indiana, Tennessee. That, of course, would be at a neutral site as we've ran down the quarterfinal sites. Miami would play the winner of Alabama, Texas, and Georgia would take on the winner of Notre Dame, Penn State. 11 games in all, and this is our first bracket, and it is a thing of beauty. I'm excited. I can't wait to fill this out. This is going to be fun. I know it's not going to take a long time to fill it out, but you got to look at it. You got to go through. You're like, who's going to be here? Where are they going to be there? Our guys are here. Richard Johnson, Brad Crawford. Richard, I'll go your way first. What jumps out to you first here when you look at the bracket?
That Penn State-Notre Dame game. That Penn State-Notre Dame game is 2 teams that are destined to lose a first-round college football playoff game with how they've played the last few years. They are thankful that the field is 12 teams so that they can actually get in. Lord knows that Penn State team is thankful that it is a 12-team field so that they can make it in the dance. But that matchup is so key for me. That is going to define the tenures of a James Franklin and a Marcus Freeman if it happens. I know we got a lot of football left, but if it were to happen that way, I'm fascinated with the narratives coming out of that game.
Yeah, these are the same 12 teams, actually, that we had in our final CBS Sports playoff projection Monday morning. 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big Ten. You've got 1 Big 12 representative in BYU. You've got 1 from the ACC, Miami. There's no SMU there. And then you've got Notre Dame and the G5 winner, Boise State. That Boise State at Ohio State first-round game, man, sign me up. Possible Heisman winner, Ashton Jeanty going up against one of the best, most talented defenses in college football. You know Jim Knowles, man, the Buckeyes defensive coordinator, does not want to face Ashton Jeanty in the first round. The 5 seed's the one you want to get, but I don't know if you want to get that playing Boise State in the first round.
Man, what if Boise State shocks the world in that opener? What if they beat Ohio State somehow, some way? Then you got to think, I mean, that road's pretty clear. You'd think they could get past BYU. And then those Broncos sitting in a semifinal, 120 minutes away from a national championship with a potential rematch against an Oregon team that it came down to the wire against in Autzen in September? Who knows, man? Who knows with that Boise team?
Well, also, Brad, to that point, if you're thinking Ohio State is going to be there, we're not really sure who's going to be playing in that Big Ten title game, but you'd have to think it's Ohio State and Oregon times 2. So perhaps Oregon they're going to be rested waiting for whoever comes out of Indiana and Tennessee, but Ohio State could be gassed when you think about playing the Big Ten title game and then a first-round matchup against Boise State, who's looking for an upset. I mean, that's what we have to start thinking about now in this new era of college football, because we weren't talking about stuff like that. This happens in college basketball in the big dance where a 1 seed, yeah, they'll get through the first round, but then they get in second or third round, it's like it's anybody's game at this point.
And there's also a chance that we see Ohio State, Oregon 3 times this season. We saw it back at Allison Stadium, 1-point loss for Ohio State. We might see it in Indianapolis here in a couple of weeks in the Big Ten championship game, and then maybe a semifinal scenario with the winner going to the finale. Man, that would be crazy because these are two of the most talented, best teams on paper in college football. But yeah, Boise State, as Richard said, if they get past that 5 seed in the first round, and then they're probably a betting favorite against BYU, that'd be very interesting. That's why we have these Cinderella conversations.
You know, and there are also potential weather implications. I know the bracket doesn't shake out like this, but what if we get into a permutation where Texas has got to go to Penn State? I mean, you think Texas wants to go up to Happy Valley in the cold and the frigid? I mean, I don't even know if Beaver Stadium's winterized for what December can bring in the middle of Pennsylvania. So keep in mind, weather is going to play into some of these games. I mean, you wonder if you're Ohio State, why don't you just call up Lucas Oil and say, hey, we got a bunch of horses from Florida that want to run on field turf. We'll come back a second week and we'll play another neutral site. That is an option, by the way, in the 12-team playoff. The higher-seeded home team can opt, if things work out, to go to a neutral site. That is on the table.
That is accurate. Yeah, it's a good point that you brought up. So if Ohio State doesn't want to play at Ohio Stadium, they can go play maybe indoors somewhere. I would have to think they'd want that game on campus, these teams, especially Penn State, as you mentioned, in mid-December, right before Christmas. Brad, when you look at Penn State, the fans are calling to fire James Franklin. He has one of the biggest buyouts in college football right now, $56 million, if they were to fire him without cause after this season. If they can get into the playoff, because they've never been in the playoff, this is something that they've been working towards. What is the path for Penn State to be there when all is said and done?
Yeah, the path for Penn State is to win out and look good doing it. I do think the Big Ten gets 4 teams in. I think if we get to a scenario in which Indiana and Penn State are both 11-1, and Indiana has maybe a 3-touchdown loss to Ohio State, no disrespect to the Hoosiers, who knows who wins that game. But then you kind of compare, outcomes against favorable opponents as the committee does, then you're taking Penn State 11-1 over Indiana 11-1. But as long as Penn State wins out, I think they're in good position here. The committee showed us tonight at number 6, and Nittany Lions are. They respect Penn State right now, despite James Franklin losing yet another big spot.
Yeah, that Penn State team, golly.
So hold on, is Penn State, if Indiana beats Ohio State, and they're both one-loss teams, who's going to play for the Big Ten title game against Oregon if Oregon wins out?
I do not know the myriad Big Ten tiebreakers, I will admit, and they are myriad for these scenarios. I think one of the most interesting subplots, not just with the Big Ten race, but also the ACC race and the SEC race, is what happens when you have these undefeated teams in these major mega conferences that haven't played each other. We were talking about this last week before SMU and Pitt played. And before Clemson lost. Like, we have all these teams that sometimes they don't play each other in the conference race. And so what happens? I mean, you got to get to, the record against common opponents and all these kinds of things. I mean, eventually they just flip a coin, Hakeem.
Yeah, that's going to be Brad. I mean, that's going to be, you want to talk about some controversy? Common opponents, and we're talking about tiebreakers there. Like, this could be absolute chaos. You want to talk about chaos in the Big 12, this could be chaos here in the Big 10.
Well, the good news for Indiana fans is Kirk Cinetti has run up the score on several teams that maybe have been common opponents for the Ohio States or the Penn States. I do think if Indiana beat Ohio State, that's going to be a 12-0 team going to Indy. I mean, it's just, that's the toughest team left on the schedule. And if they knock out Ohio State, then you have Ohio State at 10-2 overall, getting possible 10 or 11 seed. That's a dangerous 10 or 11 seed based on that $20 million payroll, as Ryan Day said, through NIL. So if I'm Indiana, this week's game's the biggest of the season. Yep. You got to beat Michigan first for that Ohio State game to matter.
So Indiana beats Ohio State at the end of the month, November 23rd. Indiana's in, and Penn State might be out. And then we're talking about like SMU or Texas A&M sneaking up, because right now they're ranked 13th and 14th on the outside looking in. Like, the door is open for one of those two teams as well if Penn State, or if Indiana is able to beat Ohio State. Because a 2-loss Ohio State team, the committee's going to say, you're done.
Yeah, you know, I look at Texas A&M and I look at Missouri. I look at Missouri at the bottom of this top 25, and I say that Missouri team is given a lot more help than people realize to a team like Texas A&M, to a team like Alabama. Keep that in mind. Now, obviously, also SMU's doing a lot of help for BYU, so it helps them with that case too. So you have a lot of those permutations, at least with this top 25, the way we see it on the first Tuesday night rankings.
Brad, is there a possibility that we would see a 2-loss Ohio State team in the playoff? Because that's what we talked about. We were like, well, the 12-team playoff, maybe we'll see a two-loss team in a playoff situation. Could they be the one with 2 losses?
It's certainly possible. And as you can see tonight, Ohio State #2, they respect that 1-point loss at Oregon. The Buckeyes simply ran out of time in that game. They weren't necessarily outplayed on the road against Oregon. Had that game been in Columbus, maybe Ohio State wins. If they meet again in Indy, maybe Ohio State wins. But to me, if Ohio State finishes 10-2, they're going to want 2 things to happen. Miami to win out and be the ACC's lone unbeaten conference champion. And then you want the same thing to happen in the Big 12. If Iowa State wins and BYU's maybe 12-1, that makes things dicey for Ohio State. Same if SMU goes to Charlotte and beats Miami and wins the ACC. What does the committee do with a 12-1 Miami team?
I think, you know, I also think, I look at Indiana and Indiana having a chance. It's all to play for Indiana, right?
Yep.
And a team like Indiana in the past, you'd say, oh, well, they'll find the banana skin and they'll slip on it. That Michigan game this weekend, Brad, you just said it. I mean, you have to take care of business in that game. Again, Indiana's done what good teams do, part 1. They've buried bad teams. But this Michigan team is the most talented team they have faced. It's not nothing to say that Michigan's athletes, especially in the trenches, are going to pose a significant challenge to Indiana, even though Indiana is a 2-touchdown favorite because Vegas has finally caught up to them, Hakeem.
This is the stuff that we love, because it's all these what-if scenarios, because you can argue right now, look, Indiana has Michigan and Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. There's a bye in there, but those 2 games right there, that's the season. And fortunately for Indiana, they get that game this week against Michigan on CBS 3:30 Eastern time. Notre Dame is also an interesting team because since losing to Northern Illinois, they've ripped off 6 straight wins. I'm confused in terms of what because they don't have any more room for error, and they have to beat Army coming up here.
Yeah, but remember, Notre Dame's beaten A&M, Louisville, and Navy. I mean, it's like Notre Dame has taken care of business in the last few weeks, and they've looked pretty darn good doing it. I mean, they erased Navy in that game at MetLife Stadium, and, you know, they absolutely smoked Purdue. So I like Notre Dame's case. One team that we haven't really talked about on this bracket, guys, Alabama. Alabama's a benefit of the doubt number 11, by the way. What the heck has Alabama done in the last few weeks to make them look significantly better than an SMU or a Texas A&M? Obviously, they play LSU this week, so we're going to figure out about the Tide. But once halftime was over against Georgia, this Alabama team came back down to earth. Water found its level, and they have not looked to me like a top 12 team in the last 3.5 games. Yes, they dispatched Missouri before their bye week, but I don't think that Missouri team's all that good.
Well, you know why Alabama's there. Brand recognition, and they had that big win against Georgia in the game of the year. So that's why Alabama's there. Now, Alabama goes to LSU this weekend, and that's basically a elimination game for both teams. So if Alabama can take care of business here, we could see them as a 2-loss team in the playoff as well. There's so many what-if scenarios, so many what could happen. What will it be when it all is said and done? Coming up, we break down the winners and losers of the college football playoff rankings next on CBS Sports HQ.